What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. This today is part two of our last episode featuring the incredible mother of Miss Hazel, who we're going to be focusing on a lot more today, Allie Adams. If you guys have not listened to that episode, please go back and listen to it. You don't have to listen to it to understand this episode, but Allie's story is very unique, and there's a lot of detail with this fight that she's going through to get her daughter back from the abusive father that she was placed with. Last week, we really dove into talking about Allie's story, her background leading up to a lot of the abuse and her pregnancy. And today, we're actually going to start introducing Hazel to everybody. So, Allie, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Emma. My pleasure.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I think, there's so many mothers coming out, and it's really cool, this little tribe that we've built. But all your stories are so unique and different, and all of them really add a different part to this puzzle that people are trying to put together. And your story, especially, there's very few, unfortunately, survivors don't always get a lot of proof of this collusion that's happening behind the scenes. And you're one of the few that actually has so much documentation and so much chronology on these different events that happen. And I think it really opens up people's minds whenever they can put together an entire story instead of just seeing these pieces that they don't know. So I think you do an awesome job with that. And today, let's pick up a little bit about around the time that not just that you had Hazel, but around the time also. Let's get into some of Hazel's story and really what we're going to focus on today.
Sure. So, even from Hazel being in utero when I was pregnant, the threat of her being taken from me by my ex had been used against me multiple times. There's emails, audio recordings, and testimony from my own mother and friends that know that that was one thing that he would say to me to threaten me or scare me. I guess keep me in line or cause me to, respond a certain way. It was a tactic to frighten me, was to say that he would take the baby. Whether he would, we'd be fighting and I wouldn't handle it. So I would be in an emotionally distressed state and he would videotape me and say, I will use this to prove you're crazy. Or he was, going behind my back to my mother and my friends and saying that he wanted to take the baby from me and not, and he used the phrasing that he would be protecting her from me when nothing, she didn't need to be protected from me in any way, shape, or form ever. The fighting with him and I was isolated between him and I, and it was something that, I worked so hard to try to nip in the bud by doing, setting up couples counseling, going to DBT myself, CBT, individual therapy, antidepressants, anti-anxieties, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, sleeping, like I was trying so many different routes to stop the constant fighting that was in the relationship, where now I look back and I think that it was on purpose, the fighting was. But I do believe inevitably it was to take my daughter from me and have grounds to do so.
And I
So,
think too, it's really important what you just said. Multiple times on my podcast, especially with mothers, that has been a defining factor of abuse, is that all of them were so broken down from their abusers that they thought 100% that the problems in the relationship were their fault.
mhm.
And they would go seek therapy or read books or do personal development. And I think that's really key, because I think that's our natural inclination anyways as humans, to take things personally and to think about, well, what can I do? And there's such a thin line between something actually being our fault and abuse sometimes, because the lines start to blur whenever you're really in that abusive state. So I wanted to point that out because that's come up so many times. And I think a lot of times after these stories come out, people can look at you and say, well, why did you stay? Like, you knew all this stuff was happening. And it's like, yeah, but you don't just always quit a job either when it's bad. Like you try to make it work. There's so many times in life we try to hold on to things that we're invested into. And I appreciate that part of your story because I think that that's something people don't look at being in their shoes is that, hey, she, and from her perspective, she didn't realize she was being abused. To her, it was, what could I do better? How can I show up better in this relationship? How can I communicate better? How can I be a better person? There has to be a communication barrier between us. There's something wrong, right? And I know you'll go into more of that, but that's not the case. You know, that's abuse when and gaslighting when that happens when you think it's you.
Yeah, I hadn't heard the term gaslighting until about close to our breakup. And that's when I learned what that was. And I think reading the definition of it, it clicked so much that I was like, that's what I'm going through. That's what's happening. That's what he's doing. It makes sense now. Now it didn't make sense before. And it was just so painful. And either like we saw one female therapist and he said he is basically stated she wasn't smart enough. We saw another male therapist for a few sessions. I don't even know why that one continued. And then the last, maybe because we moved, but then the next gentleman we saw, he liked him, but I remember standing at the front desk ready to make the next appointment, and I looked over and I said, well, when are you free? Like when do you want to come back? And he said, we'll talk about it later. And that was the way of making sure that no appointment was ever made again, because he didn't want to fix anything. The what was happening was designed. When I was in the Minnesota Center for Psychology DBT program, which was a year-long program, intensive outpatient. I would go once a week for group therapy. So we sit in a group in a circle and discuss like our emotions and our triggers and different things we were struggling with. And then once a week, individual therapy for an hour. And it was that individual therapist that about the time before I stopped doing that program, I was there about a year. She said to me, I don't think you're struggling with borderline personality disorder symptoms. You're being abused. You're showing the symptoms and the signs of you are being domestically abused. And I think that was about the start of me wanting to detach from the relationship. But when you're groomed for so long and you're so reliant on the person, you're financially abused, you're emotionally. So it was his decision that we wouldn't pay for daycare and I would stay home. So I didn't work. So I didn't have any career under my belt or any income coming in. I had no way to provide for myself if I was to leave. I couldn't move out. I just couldn't afford it. There wasn't anything I could do. It was moving down here to my house currently that my parents were kind enough to have purchased as our starter home. I think the intention was that we'd live here for a little while before purchasing our own home. And then my parents could sell this house and make, an investment off of it. But because it's my home, I could ask him to leave. And it was the first time that was kind of something that was plausible in the 3 years that we had lived, 3.5 years that we'd lived with Hazel, as well as when she's a baby, you stay for the baby. You stay because they need both parents. You think they need both parents, and
Try to do the right thing at the end of the day. That's what you're trying to fight for love. You're trying to fight to give your child a good life. Abuse isn't always so black and white, and that's on purpose. It's by design. Abusers don't just come at you abusing you. They manipulate you into loving them and caring about them and wanting to fight for them and being invested into a relationship, especially the isolation that ends up happening. You
yeah,
know,
it's not all they call you names and punch you in the face. That's simple and that's easy and that's detectable and you can see that and you can recognize it. So somebody that wants to abuse you but not lose you isn't going to do that. They're going to criticize you in weird ways. They're going to give you sideways looks. They're going to not touch you for 7 weeks. They're going to tell you your dinners you make them aren't good enough. They're not going to help you when you ask for help cooking. They're going to say, I remember once I was peeling potatoes and the water started to boil. And I said, oh, will you come help me get these potatoes done so I get them in the water? And he said, you shouldn't have started the water. and didn't come help me. And it was just little things like that, over time it breaks you down. It makes you feel, because he was blaming me for not wanting to help me. Do you understand? Like, it made me then think, oh, well, then I must have done something wrong. When truly, he should have just come help me with the potatoes. You know what I mean? Like, it's simple stuff like that. But when you're in the thick of it, you don't realize what it is. You don't see it for what it is. You think, oh, what a dick. But truly, that almost every day for years is what creates PTSD, is what creates the long lasting trauma that you then have to heal from. But when we moved down here, I'll try to get back on the story. When we moved down here, I realized this opportunity of changing the way our dynamics work was available to me. And I sent him a long breakup email in August. I think it was August 14th. I sent it, maybe 8th. I was in Canada with my mother and Hazel. My grandpa had died. And so we'd gone up there for the funeral. And my ex was not speaking to my mother at the time. She had helped us move into this house and had stayed here for about a month, helping us organize and put away and put things in cabinets. And, just, it's a 4-bedroom, 2,000 square foot house. So it was kind of a lot to set up. So she'd come in and stayed with us. And in her statement to the police, I did provide you with the redacted version of that. She comments about how when she was here, she finally saw for herself what he'd been doing to me. The crazy making you feel small, making you feel stupid, making you question yourself. This type of bullying. It was a type of bullying. And my mother had, thought about harming herself while she was here. So she left. So then my grandpa died and we went up to Canada and he wasn't speaking to my mother. And I had told him to tell her, I'm sorry for your loss, because, her dad had died. And I had to tell him to say that to her. He said it to her. She was grateful that he finally spoke to her and wished her, condolences. But I was the one who had to tell him to do it. And I mean, her and I spoke about it and she knew that. She knew that I had to tell him to do that. And it was a constant thing in my family that they kind of hinted like I should leave him. I'm always crying. I'm always unhappy. I'm always like, I wasn't the same person anymore that I'd been prior to living with him.
What parts of you would they say weren't the same?
I was a shell of myself. Like I'd gotten generalized anxiety disorder. So I had a hard time doing things alone. Even going to appointments, I would have to call and ask if there was parking because I was so anxious about getting there with parking. Because when you're in an environment where your nervous system is constantly being jarred, you're like that with everything around you. And appointments in a new place, it's just jarring. It's like, I don't know. Like, you just always feel so unsure. It's essentially, stated as walking on eggshells, but I felt like I was living on eggshells. Like, it didn't even matter, what I said or did. Sometimes just days were completely ruined by him. And I don't know, well, I know why now. He was trying to break me psychologically. But at the time, I didn't know what it was. And I just kept fighting. I remember I bought mugs that would say like the best things are worth fighting for, things like that, like trying to use affirmations around me to keep going. But like I said, Hazel was 3.5 years old. She'd started to recognize what was happening in the house. She said it was a naughty house. She knew that we fought. She could regurgitate the fact that we were fighting. I didn't want her thinking that's how men treat women. That's what love looks like. I had a home. I could ask him to leave. So I essentially stated, let's take a separation, even for like a year, like just go live on your own, learn how to cook for yourself and eat, because he wouldn't eat if I didn't make him food. So if I didn't make him food, he'd be hungry. So then he'd be cranky and he'd be mean to me. but it'd be my fault that he was mean to me because I didn't feed him. You understand? Like it was a lot like that.
And
So
how old was Hazel at this time? Whenever you had proposed the separation?
she was 3.5 years old. So she was born in March and we separated March, April, May, June, July, August. Yeah, she was 3 and 5 months. Or 4 months.
And
I'm
then
not
compared to how he treated you up until this point, how did you view him with Hazel? Did he act differently towards her? Was he more loving? Was he abusive to her? What did you notice with their dynamic from the time she was born?
he had always been very doting and very involved in being a parent. Like he didn't leave it just to me, like moms take care of kids, right? He did a lot too. They went out a lot together. They went on hikes. They'd go to the Mall of America together. They, you know, um, they did a lot together, and I loved that. I didn't have that growing up, so I thought that that was wonderful for her. But if he was angry or mad, he would be very quick to be a degree of abusive. Like if I saw him like hit her, you know, I wouldn't have stayed. But I know I saw him once place her in the bathroom and turn off the light and shut the door because she was crying. And that was his response to her crying was, I'm gonna shut you in a room with the lights off. Like, okay. I remember once I heard him spank her and I wasn't on the same level of the house, but I heard it and it was so loud. I was I was kind of shook by the sound of it. And then also like sometimes he'd put her in her crib. Like we tried to do the, if she was having a tantrum, put her in the crib for a timeout, but he'd do it very quickly and very like aggressively, like pick her up and put her down. And it was just not the way that you handle a child. And it's hard to think what she's gone through with me not around from what I know even happened when I was around.
I'm
So,
sorry you had to go through this. I'm so sorry she's still going through it.
um,
I appreciate
so
you talking about it.
it's okay. It's almost as if there was kind of like two personalities, right? So there was the fun guy that went, you know, had his friends around and would have a beer with his friends and like help everybody move. If he needed to move, he's the first person there. And then there's the at home, hasn't eaten, picking on mom, mad at the kid when she's crying, like that person. And they're not this, they don't look the same. And only people that lived with him, I think, saw.
And then I think for you too, seeing the dynamic of how loving he was whenever he was loving to Hazel, that is such a thing that we connect with other people on, is that like maternal paternal bond.
Yeah.
I think
And
too,
it gives you
you
hope.
would
It gives
question
you
yourself, like, gosh, it must be me. Like everybody else thinks he's nice to Hazel. Like I must be the common denominator of what's wrong here. You start to narrow it in on yourself, not realizing that you're just the one that's let in on the joke that everybody else isn't, you know?
so come we moved in June, July, August. Through that summer, Hazel had to go to the doctor for perennial itching once. And then the next time, August 4th, I brought her in for itching, perennial itching, to the Minute Clinic near my house because we didn't have a GP down here. We didn't have a pediatrician yet. We just moved here, and I think this is something that I think people don't. If with me explaining it, they'll understand better. We didn't have a doctor yet, so down here I brought her to the Hy-Vee Minute Clinic. You know, the little like clinic in your grocery store for a urine analysis because she was scratching and the doctor said she has a urinary tract infection and gave us medicine. And since this was the first UTI and I'm a girl, so I know we get them, I didn't, you know, there was no way I thought anything of it.
Now,
I
is
didn't.
that common with infants? For other parents that might be listening, could that be a sign of abuse? Is that
I, it, the problem with what are medical symptoms of abuse, they can be explained for other things too. So with UTIs, they're pretty uncommon in kids 3 and under. It's about it's like 2% of kids will get them. They can say that they get them from the bathtub. They say they can get them from wiping incorrectly. When um, essentially a UTI in a small child is also a huge indication of molestation. So, with it being explained by both,
It's
you
tough.
know,
Yeah.
it's tough. But with
That's a good thing for people to listen to though, because a lot, I know if I had a kid, that wouldn't be, unless I knew that I was with an abuser, which most people don't, or they wouldn't be with them.
yeah,
Um, that would be something too I would just overlook and just say, oh, she just must be part of that 2% and forget about it, right? And again, not that it necessarily means 100% of the time that it could be abuse. I think that's a really key thing because a lot of parents say, how do I know if this is happening to me?
yeah. So, I mean, even prior to the August UTI diagnosis, in April of 2018, after her third birthday, living in the house we lived in before this one, I had brought her in for her well check, and the doctor. One of the concerns I had expressed to her, she had a pediatrician in Minneapolis at Children's, was I said, well, she's been saying some sexual comments, and I don't remember exactly what they were because I didn't think anything of it. But I did tell her pediatrician, which meant I don't know if the doctor had said, do you have any concerns? And it just popped into my mind. But I do know my ex had blamed me for her making these statements or, sentences she was saying by insinuating because I allowed her to watch YouTube on my phone in the car while we drove that she had seen something inappropriate on YouTube, and that it was my fault. Again, it was my fault. So over time, the the um, the evidence that corroborates the likelihood probability of abuse keeps building, and that's the thing is you can have say there's one instance of a UTI and that's what somebody is saying is that's my evidence of abuse. With Hazel's case, there's so much that you cannot excuse every single thing away. Like, well, that's because of this, that's because of that, that's because of that. You can't say, well, that's a wing, but it may not be a duck. You can't say that's a beak and it may not be a duck. You can't say that's a webbed foot. It may not be a duck and that's quacking. It may not, because if you put all of it together, you have a duck. You've got wings, a webbed foot, quacking, a beak. That's a duck, right? But with Hazel's case, they were like, they tried to insinuate her UTI was from wiping incorrectly. And that's just not the case. Yes, she had recently become potty trained out of kind of pressure from her father that she become potty trained. But I mean, half the time I would wipe for her because she didn't necessarily fully know how to do it. And so they just said that. They either said it was from like a potty training issue or a bathtub issue where she took baths multiple times a week, sometimes, but most of the time bubble baths, but never for too very long. She'd play, get washed, and get out. And that was just the one time in the medical history that I'm privy to that she had a urinary tract infection. So that's 8-4. We then go to Canada. We break up. I come back. There was a couple weeks that we were in the house together that was pretty uncomfortable. He was trying to stay. He had offered to go to counseling again. He offered to marry me. He offered to have another baby. He offered to do anything and everything to stay. And I had just said, it's not about that. I'm not doing this to force you to do something like that. I want a separation because you need to change and grow as a person to be a better partner to me and father to our daughter, because I don't think having another baby is going to fix how you abuse me, or I don't think getting married is going to change how you abuse me. I needed him to go be on his own and like experience the consequences of losing us because of how he behaved, but like make him address it. So go to therapy, talk to somebody about what's internally bothering you. What is it? What's wrong? What's eating at your soul? Because I was in therapy the entire time we were together, figuring out what was eating at my soul. And at the end of those 3.5 years, I realized what was eating at my soul was him. I wasn't depressed. I wasn't anxious. I didn't have low feelings of self-worth. I'd been sober since 2009. So by 2015, that was 6 years. By 2018, that was about 9 years that I hadn't drank. And everybody knew that about me. And that kept me from any kind of polysubstance abuse. So I just lived a much mentally clearer, healthier state, right? I could process my emotions better. We both smoked weed. Mine was more of a harm reduction program for many years to stay away from other things.
Same.
He had, yeah, he had,
I do that too.
he had, he drank alcohol and smoked weed, but I didn't think it was problematic in any way. He didn't get drunk and act a fool or get stoned or act a fool. You know what I mean? Like it was just recreational, habitual things we both partook in. Um, but I just needed him to improve himself to match me on my level of improvement to be the couple that I wanted us to be. And I thought the only way to achieve that was to ask him to go out and focus on himself, like go get an apartment, live on your own for a year,
Which is
get better.
really smart of you. I know so many couples that they'll go get married, even though they have the most crappy relationship, or they'll have a kid because they think, oh, this is a good band-aid to put over this. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's like building a house. You can't build a house over a faulty foundation, and a lot of people try to do that. That's actually really, you were so much more aware, I think, than what you thought going through this.
And this is all in an email that I sent to him. I laid this all out, and I had said, we didn't need to go to like custody court. I'd say we'll split Hazel 50-50. I would never keep you from her. I would never deprive her of you. Like that was more important, that she had him more than he had her. But I didn't want her to lack. I also even stated in the email, it was very important that we did things as a family so that the dynamic wasn't so drastic of a change for her, so that it was an easier adjustment. It wouldn't fuck her up. Sorry, I don't know. Sorry, pardon my French.
Good.
I just didn't want it to be so much of our being as a family was ugly. It felt just painful. I wanted the healing and getting better to not be painful, because that was what I was trying so hard to avoid. One thing I had done, I had reached out to 3 ex-girlfriends and asked them what their experiences with him were like, and they all had very similar abuse of being abused psychologically, knowing about his abuse and how that affects him, and different things that he would do, like not eat, or kind of be abusive in a sexual manner, in the sense that like he would withhold affection. He would he wouldn't touch somebody. He wouldn't touch me or an ex-girlfriend. He just wouldn't do it. I know that when, sorry, go ahead.
Weaponizing sex, right?
Which is a form of abuse. Yep. It's sexual abuse. It's just not the typical kind you think of.
Yeah.
But I remember my mother once asking, she spoke to him about it for me, like, why aren't you having sex with Ellie? Why won't you be, why aren't you being intimate with her? And because I'd probably express, I spoke to my mom every day. I'd probably express like how it was bothering me and like how hurt I felt. And I was probably like looking at myself and thinking, is it me? Is it my body? Is it like, what is it? Like, why won't he love me? And he had answered my mother with, she hasn't earned it. He, as if I needed to earn that. And like becoming aware of all these strange mentalities and behaviors in regarding our interpersonal relationship we had was what helped me understand that he needed to fix things about himself, because never would I have not made love to him and in my mind thought, you haven't earned it. Like, I just don't think that way.
Right.
I don't think most people do.
Like normal people do. Yeah.
It was the same with marriage. He hadn't married me because I hadn't earned it. And I'm thinking,
what more do you need?
how am I supposed to earn this? Like, is there like a a spreadsheet. I got to fill out every box every week. If I don't meet my criteria,
Oh,
I don't.
yeah,
It was just,
abusive.
yeah, it was all designed. It's psychological warfare, essentially, looking back at it now. So I asked him to leave. He didn't want to. He tried to stay. Um, Eventually, I think I put my foot down in like, you cannot be here, because now we live in like hell because we're broken up, or I've separated from you as your girlfriend, and you're still in my home, and you're mean to me now. Like now, like you're blatantly mean. Like now there's no bar, like no gloves. Like it's just abusive. So I had him leave on, I believe it was August 24th, because at the time, I remember I'd spoken to, I think, a custody attorney, and a few things that they had stated to me was, during this phase of like the breakup, she said, document everything, write down the dates that everything happens. So I remember putting in my phone the date that he, like the first day he left, which, and didn't sleep here, and that was August 24th. On September 3rd, so the night before my birthday, we had made plans. I wanted the three of us to spend time together. He'd probably been gone for about a week, and I wanted still a normalcy appearance, even just for Hazel's sake. And he came over and sat down in my living room and said, "I'm not feeling it," and wanted to leave with my daughter. And I said, "I'm sorry. No. That's, what? Like, you're not like, that was it. I'm not feeling it," and wanted to take her. And I said, "No, we're not doing that. You're not going to take this opportunity that I'm granting you to have a healthy interaction with us as a family and grow, to just pour gasoline and light it and storm off with my kid, essentially creating Hazel as a pawn piece to harm me with." Because I saw what he was doing. By this point, I had been so able to emotionally detach from him that being able to witness what was going on from like an outsider's point of view was a lot more easier. I could tell now. I could like see it more clearly. Hindsight's 2020. And he like fought with me, but Hazel got very upset and wanted to go with him because she wanted to see her dad. So I said, "Okay, you can go for a couple hours." And this is all in text messages that were all used throughout the trial. It was one of the more poignant parts to show how he treated me was, and at this time, because we were never married, I did have sole physical custody of Hazel. Like she couldn't be anywhere I didn't say she could be. So they leave. 2 hours later, I start contacting, like, "When are you coming? When are you bringing her back?" He ignores me. I think like for 7 hours or something was what my attorney said at the trial. It was a really long time. And I'm calling and I'm texting, and I'm, he's causing me to elevate because he's ignoring me when he knows. And this is, I'm looking for my baby. There's nothing else that's going to get you more emotionally risen than your child.
Yeah.
So I tell him, I was like, "If you don't bring her back, I'm gonna call the police, and I'm gonna report her kidnapped," which biological parents kidnap their kids all the time. And when a parent takes a child and the custodial parent doesn't allow them to be with that person, the other parent, that is technical kidnapping. That is a kidnapping issue, and Amber Alerts are enforced for that situation all the time. So, I mean, this wasn't something I wanted to do. That's why I told him, "If you don't talk to me, you don't bring her back, I'm gonna have to call 911. What he did instead, and this was presented at the trial, with having all the police records from the, when you live in a house, you just request everything that's happened at that address, every phone call, every time they had to come here. And I think that was something that was pretty prevalent in all three houses we lived in, was the amount of times 911 was called by me to come and help. It was a lot. So when I called the police, I didn't know this at the time. I know this now. My ex had called 911 already. Probably not the emergency line, but I don't know. He'd already called them to preemptively warn them that his ex-girlfriend was going to call and report a kidnapping, but that he didn't kidnap her and that they should just kind of ignore me. So they did. So when I call, and here's something that's just not quite normal. When requesting the records from Dakota County, including all 911 calls, you request the calls so you can listen to them. We requested that phone call over 6 months after it had happened, and Dakota County only holds on to their 911 calls for 6 months. In comparison, our neighboring county, Hennepin County, keeps their 911 calls for 6 years.
6 months seems like an awfully short time, especially an important case that could drag on for years or years.
And that's the thing about trials and cases, and they go on forever. So to erase evidence after 6 months is incredibly negligent and kind of strange. And it was something my attorney had never seen before, but that's just the way they handled it down here. Was they didn't have his call to them and what he said to them, which is what we needed for the trial. So he had told the police not to help me. When I called, I still wasn't as sure of the laws and the rules yet, but they just told me we don't interfere with a civil issue. And at the time, this wasn't a civil issue. There was no custody papers filed. There was no petitions for custody. Nothing had happened in the legal system at all. I had sole custody. I had permanent say where she was, and he had taken her and wasn't bringing her back. And technically an Amber Alert should have gone out and she should have been brought home. Instead, the next day, September 4th, I woke up on my birthday, and I think I slept on the couch, which is very unlike me. That's usually means I'm in distress. I woke up and it was like 11, and because I'd been up all night panicking. And I texted him and I asked him when he was going to bring her back. And he said, give us 45 minutes, or he said they'd be back in 45 minutes. And they showed up on my birthday. He had a card for me because it was my birthday. And I'm not sure if it was from him and Hazel or just Hazel, but it wasn't not a lot of thought or effort put into it. And I think gas station flowers, like a very small $5, $8 bouquet of simple flowers, like I think an attempt to be nice. But the weirdest part about that time at noon, walking in the door with her at noon, he told her to get in the bathtub. He told her to go take a bath, which was really weird. Why are you having her take a bath at noon? Why? Now I know he was washing evidence off of her. I'll have to come back to what I think happened on 9/3 later, because I don't want to go too far around, but I'm pretty sure that the reason he had her get in the bathtub that morning or that day, which it was just a really weird time to make her do that, was to wash off urine or fecal matter or semen or whatever had happened to her. And there was a couple other things that happened during those 2-3 weeks when I'd allow them to have time together. And I mean, I was letting him take her for overnights. Why wouldn't I? I didn't know what was going on. But so one other time he brought her back with a temperature of 104.1. So like she walked in the house, he left, I touched her and she was on fire. And I had to put her in the bathtub to cool down because 104 is close, like they can die. And I texted him, and that was part of our trial too. An exhibit was me saying like, why is she 104 degrees? Like what's going on with her? Another time he brought her in and she'd been changed, which is fine, but her dress and the bloomers to her dress had been washed, but like they were really stiff. Like it just wasn't a proper wash. Like maybe no dryer was used. It was just kind of a weird. And I asked him what happened, and he said she wet herself, and she didn't do that. Like she didn't have accidents. She didn't have accidents. So it was just kind of like a lot of things were happening and had been happening for months. You had the sexual comments, the perennial itching, the UTI, the kidnapping, putting her in the bathtub, her temperature, washing her clothes. Like it was just it was weird. It was just kind of a weird situation.
Yeah,
And
if you're not thinking about that, because that's not something a lot of us, it's not the first thing on our mind. All those things are so easily misconstrued where you just feel like, am I just overreacting? Is this, maybe it is nothing and I'm paranoid and I'm upset and I'm emotionally charged. And then all the years of grooming that you went through, even way before this, it's like you're already broken down to a point where you're not thinking critically all the time.
no, and I also like
That's
only now looking back am I aware of all those things and in the order of what they happened at the time during September of 2018. I was separating from somebody I had been trauma bonded to. I was separating from somebody who used coercive control to manipulate me. I was separating from somebody that I felt insanely codependent on and trying to stand on my own 2 feet with no finances. And my family had moved to Arizona. I'm completely alone here in Minnesota. I'm also isolated a half hour out of the city where all my friends are.
and you
It
have
was
a baby, like, so
my
you
baby.
it's not like you can just cut him out anyways. Like you're sharing custody with him at this point. You still have to see him.
There was just a lot going on for me emotionally to even process clearly what was going on. I was distraught myself most of the time. And I believe it was mentioned during the trial that the police, when I gave them my phone and they went through my phone, obviously they looked for the first time any words that have to do with abuse or molestation or sexual abuse is ever referenced on my phone. Like, because they can check that. The only time it said I had ever talked about, typed in, written, Googled molestation was on 9/3, on the night before my birthday when he kidnapped her. I had said to my friend, to save her anonymity, we'll call her Brittany, I had told her, I think he's molesting her. And it was the first probably fear of mine and concern, and the first time I'd voiced it.
Now, when he came back that morning, that was really the first that you had heard from him on your birthday. What was his excuse? Why did he say he didn't talk to you? He didn't reach out to you? What did he say?
He kind of spun it like I had said they could have the night, but since I had changed my mind because of his behavior, I was in the wrong to restrict it. Like it was wrong of me to say you only had 2 hours then. He tried to say that I was using Hazel as a pawn instead of him doing it, when I was trying to just really affirm the boundaries of how we're going to treat each other and how we were going to handle these situations. And if we had made plans as a family to interact as a family to save Hazel's sake of seeing us be okay with each other, he's not going to come in, sit down, go, I'm not feeling it, and want to take her off. Like that was my boundary, was no, you're not doing that. I'm not letting you fuck up my day, her day, our month, just because you're mad at me for breaking up with you. So he just kind of spun it like it was wrong of me to take back what I had said he could have, which was time with her. So again, it was my fault that he ignored me and didn't respond to me and just didn't say anything. He didn't say where they were or anything like that. He didn't give me any kind of, I mean, like I said, I spoke to a custody attorney around this time, and that was, I think, after the kidnapping. And I was told that if he didn't have a bedroom for her that I was aware of, that I didn't have to give him overnights, because even in the law, in the legal and custody court, like if a parent has the child, they need to have a bedroom to provide for the child. So she said, well, he's got to have a bedroom, as well as he didn't have a valid driver's license, which was pretty common for him. And she said, if he doesn't have a valid driver's license, you can let him not drive with her, because if there's an accident, then everybody, there's liability. So she said, she'd given me all these parameters that I was enforcing or trying to enforce because it's legally correct. If there's no bedroom, you don't have her overnight. If you don't have a driver's license, you can't drive off with her. And the way he had handled losing his driver's license was he let me drive his car. So then if I got pulled over with that license plate, it's me. And I had a valid driver's license and he took my car. So then if they ran my driver's license, it's, you know, registered. Somebody has they think it could be me, not him. So it was his way of not getting caught. Instead of paying the money to get it reinstated, that was his solution, was we just switched cars. So at this time I had his car and he had my car. And my car had no heat or air conditioning and hadn't had heat or air conditioning for 3 years. And I had raised a baby in it in Minnesota, where it can be -30 in the winter and 105 in the summer. And there is no heat or AC. But he only then drove my broken car when he lost his license. So like, that's just kind of the way he is. September 9th. On September 9th, as normal, Hazel would wake me up at around 6:30. That was just kind of when she woke up. She was a pretty early riser. And she slept downstairs in her room. She'd come upstairs and she'd kind of let me know she was awake. I got up, I made her toast. We went back and crawled into my bed together and I put on cartoons for her as I did every day. Because normally she'd watch the Winnie the Pooh movie, was a pretty common morning thing for her to watch while I got a little bit more sleep. And then when it was over, she'd wake me up or we'd wake up and we'd get up for the day. So I got her into bed with me, turned on the cartoons, and I went back to sleep while she watched cartoons. The next thing I know, I wake up to 2 police officers in my bedroom waking me up. Come to find out, Hazel had put her slippers on, put the leash on Sachi, and opened the front door and gone outside with her. And this was all something she'd never done before. She'd never taken the dog out for a walk. She'd never walked outside before. It was an unusual experience. It was a one-off. What I know happened based on our Ring system. We had the Ring alarm system, and that would notify, like a system online, all the different things that happened, as well as the camera would record. So at 8:13, the front door opens. So this is when she's taking Sachi outside, the front door open. So she undid the bolt lock and then pulled it. I can't remember if there's a button. I don't think there's. I think she just did the bolt lock and then turn and pull. And I remember asking her like to do it in front of me to see if she could, and she did it. And I was like, I didn't know you could do that. And then she would open up the screen door, which is a big glass door with this kind of handle, and gone outside. But then outside the glass door is about a step this big down to the concrete. So I think what happened is she went outside, went up through the screen door, had the dog. Maybe Sachi had been whining to pee, you know, like whining at us in bed. And Hazel thought I should let the dog out and didn't know how to do the screen door. I don't know. I can't speak for her. She was 3 and she never fully explained it to me. But then when coming back in, she couldn't reach the outside handle of the screen door because now she's about a half a foot even lower. So I don't think she could reach it. So she's outside and she's calling for me at the front door with the dog. And a neighbor sees her because we have a very family-oriented neighborhood. It's a really wide street, very chill, not a lot of traffic. Everyone's outside doing yard work or whatever. So somebody came to the door and rang the doorbell and I didn't hear it. I'm assuming mainly because I had cartoons playing still and I wasn't used to.
Your mom, you're exhausted.
I was not sleeping well because of the breakup. I had, it was giving me major insomnia. I was trying to be okay with this giant life change that I wasn't prepared for, but needed to do. This wasn't fun. This wasn't a happy time. It was a necessary time. And so I just didn't hear the doorbell. what's crazy, and I think people need to understand, is that when all this was happening at the door, all these notifications were going off on his phone. And he was at work, he was awake. And so he would have had his phone as usual in his pocket. And when the front door opened, he would have been notified. When the doorbell rang, he was notified. He didn't call me. When she went outside, he didn't see her on the video and let me know. He the next thing I knew, when the neighbor rang the doorbell, he answered from his phone and said, "Hi, what's going on?" or something along, I've never seen the recording of it because I think it was gone. Side note, it's a little weird, but during a lot of this experience, anytime like the police came to my house and were at the door, the ring system, those videos would be gone. So like when police were at my house, when I go back into the system, ring.com or alarm.com, and I go to watch the videos of the police at the house, they would be gone. They wouldn't be there. So the video of Hazel outside with Sachi in the morning, the neighbor ringing the doorbell, and my ex answering weren't there. They were gone. So my ex didn't call me or say, let her in the door, because obviously the front door is still open. You can still, like, she didn't go outside and lock it behind her. She didn't have a key, like, let her in the house, just put her inside. Instead, he called 911. No need to, but he did. And so when the police arrived, they rang the doorbell again. I still don't hear it. I'm in my bedroom. There's cartoons playing. I'm asleep. They come in, I think, at 8:35. So about 20-ish minutes, 22 minutes have gone by. They come into my room and they wake me up, and they were like angry at me. They weren't like, "Are you okay? Your daughter was outside. We've brought her to you." They were mad at me. They were mean to me. I'm crying. I remember crying to them, saying like, I've been having a really hard time with this breakup. I didn't get to bed at like an early-ish hour, so I'm just still tired. That's why. And it's still only 8:30. Like, it's still early. It's still pretty like early morning. Like,
And you do a routine that you do all the time, bringing Hazel in bed with you. She usually just chills with you. Like, it's not like this was an unusual circumstance either, where you sleep longer than she does. She usually just hangs out with you.
yeah, it was just
It's a weird freak.
I'm sorry, because of how much this has been spun. I mean, I've had women that even knew me, mothers that were my friends, that I've seen say Hazel was playing outside for hours while her mom was passed out on drugs and the police had to break down the door. No, they didn't. Like, you've obviously never read any of the paperwork. It's like, so it's just, this is hard to talk about because of the traumatization of people spinning this experience as it wasn't. I wasn't. So the police did write in.
You're trying to validate the truth. It's almost like when you're dating somebody and they're constantly accusing you of cheating on them, even though you're not, you end up feeling guilty for something you're not even doing just because of the outside interference constantly bogging you down. Like, that shouldn't have been anything you had to explain to anybody. And you still don't. Like, that's an accident any parent could have. I even think about myself, if I have nights where I can't sleep and how hard I'll sleep, that, second, third, fourth night after not getting any sleep. And I don't even have kids. So I can't even imagine how exhausted you were and going through a breakup. Like,
it was just a lot on my plate. But the police wrote in their report that I don't know if they said the whole house or my bedroom smelled like burnt marijuana, which, I mean, that's the exact terminology they used. I kept my marijuana in my bedside table, because that's a drawer that Hazel would never go into. She wasn't allowed, she didn't go into, and that was where I kept it. So my room, I'm sure, smelled like it, as well as I'd probably smoked the night before going to bed, trying to go to sleep since I was struggling with sleep. They made a reference to it, and I said, I'm struggling with sleep, this breakup, I'm crying. They wrote in the report that I kept making up excuses. Like, the whole report's very maligned. Like, they're very harsh on me, and I don't even know why. They Dakota County did an investigation into negligence because of the incident, which I believe it's October 15th. I received the final response from Dakota County saying they found no negligence. Shit happens. Kids sometimes walk out the front door when you are sleeping and you can't be awake all the time. Like,
Yeah.
it's
That
really,
can happen with any parent, even if it's just in the middle of the night. A kid could hypothetically get up and do that at any point during the night.
I know I walked away from my grandparents' house in Canada when I was 5 to go play with the neighbor kid, and I didn't tell anybody. And it was the morning, and I just woke up and wanted to go play with the neighbor. So, like, I know I did that too. And I gave my grandma a heart attack. I remember getting yelled at, and I was like, my grandma never yelled at me, but I scared her so bad, And obviously I was scared when they told me Hazel had been outside, but I was more confused how it all happened because I'd just never seen her do that. And they said, the fact that she had her slippers on, she's just a smart kid. She put her slippers on. She even leashed the dog. And I didn't know she could leash her, like use, the clasp. But it just kind of, to me, it seemed like I bet thought she was whining to go to the bathroom. And Hazel's like, I can do it,
Trying to be mom.
She couldn't get back in. And instead of people understanding and the situation being treated appropriately, I was persecuted mostly and kind of insinuated that like it was wrong of me to just still be asleep. And it was wrong of me to have smoked marijuana within the 24 hours prior, it's been said that I was passed out, and I've never passed out on weed ever. Like
Either. Well, unless I eat like way too many edibles, but if I'm just like
edibles, like we don't have access to edibles here. And having
so many of them anyways.
Having a harm reduction program for years, my tolerance was so high. I don't know what I would have had to smoke or how much to pass out. I was just still asleep. And I've even seen trolling say I was passed out on the lawn. If I was on the lawn,
what?
If I was in my front yard, my kid wouldn't have been at the door calling for, like, there's just people spin.
Okay, and I just want to make a point. It makes me so irritated as somebody that works in the cannabis industry that smokes weed all the time. It makes me so mad that it's so cool for moms to drink a whole bottle of wine and to have their little cocktails, but they can't take a hit of a freaking vape pen. I just had to get that out there because it really scares me.
I drank at one point, and I remember passing out on alcohol when I was a kid. I remember that. I've never once ever passed out hard on weed that might be, even if I had passed out on weed, me being passed out on weed isn't why she walked out the front door with the dog.
Exactly. Right.
Did that.
Right.
But I know I've mentioned to you in our private conversations, I don't believe that whole experience of her going outside and the police coming and them writing the report they did, I don't think it's a completely 100% legitimate experience. I think it was staged. I think what happened, or at least the police that wrote that report, I think custody was my ex's main goal and was going to try take it with using this negligence investigation to gain custody. That's looking back now and knowing everything I know, that makes the most sense to me. But whether or not I could ever prove that, who knows?
That he called the cops.
Well, he'd already called them before and said to them that I was going to accuse him of kidnapping, and they helped him. They didn't call me. And I mean, if I was a police officer and somebody called me and said, hey, I've left with the kid. My ex-girlfriend's going to call you and say I kidnapped the kid. Don't believe her. If I was a police officer,
check it out. That's crazy.
I would say, okay, stop driving. I'd say, stop moving where you are. Stay still. I'm going to call the mother now and find out both sides of this situation. Instead, they just did what he asked. They just took his word for truth without any double checking whether or not it was legitimate what he was saying. And that is part of the forensic experts report on the entire case, is so much of him just saying, no, I didn't do that, is good enough for the police down here for Dakota County. No investigation necessary. Just He said he didn't, and that's all we need is him to say he didn't do it.
I
So
might not know this answer, but this just came up in my head, so I want to ask: did your ex have any connections to police or anything that you know of, or no?
he, whether he knows an officer down here, either in Farmington, Apple Valley, Rosemount, Lakeville, the neighboring, the neighboring cities, if he knows any officers employed, I don't know that. What I do know is he is from down here. This is where he grew up. This is where he went to high school, where he spent his early 20s before moving into the city. This is his stomping grounds from adolescence. I know he mentioned that I think it was the chief of police of Lakeville didn't like him because of a girl he dated. He got his girlfriend, like in high school, but now he's the chief of police. And he said, so he didn't like to drive through Lakeville because he felt he would be um, either targeted or pulled over. He was nervous of that.
Yeah.
But besides that's all I knew about his connections to anybody down here. But there's connections that I have found personally, or at least I think, and I won't get into, but maybe later. There's just so many details I don't want to
100%. Yes.
yet. So
Yeah, you can pick up stuff.
but it was an odd experience with the police officers in my house being mean to me about what was happening. It was weird. Whether they just hate weed and they just smelt it and thought this deadbeat mom and the kids outside, let's be mean to her. I can't speak for them. Again, body cam. I don't know if I have the body cam footage of when they came into the house at night on September 9th. I don't think I do. I wish I did, actually, because I wish I could see it. Watch the interactions between the two officers and myself and what's said to me and how I respond. I would like to watch that, actually. But then fast forward a couple more days, on September 11th, it was about midday. I want to say like 11 a.m., noon. And Hazel gone to the bathroom, and I'd gone with her, as I did a lot, because she was still learning how to do things. If she pooped, I might have had to help her still. It was a process. And even just like getting on the toilet and sitting on there, like don't fall because she's little.
Handing her toilet paper. Yeah.
So she was peeing and pooping at the same time, which is always lovely to do, but I don't think did it very often. And so she goes, pee pee in the front, poo poo in the back, just being herself, just like being goofy. And I wanted to see what she would say. So I said, what's in the middle? Like, I was just curious what her response would be. And she said, blood. And she said, it's sticky and you wipe it on your leg. And she did this like motion like this across her leg with her fingers. And I said, have you ever bled down there? And she said, she looked down and she came back up and she goes, not today. And I said, have you ever bled down there with Dada? And she said, Dada puts ice and cream down there. And I immediately knew the gravity of what she was saying. She didn't, but I did. And so we left the bathroom, we finished up, we came into the living room and I sat her in the chair. And I said, has Dada ever put his finger down there? Because we didn't call it vagina, it was all the tushy. And she said, no. And I said, has Dad ever put his penis? And I pointed to like my crotch because I didn't know if she knew the word penis. Did Dad ever put his penis down there? And she goes, not hard, but soft like this. And she like did something with her hands and I didn't fully see it, but I think it was also because I was so in shock by what she was saying. That he'd put his penis down there, not hard, but soft. Like, it was a sentence that I knew what she was saying. I think anybody who could have been with us at the time would have known what she was saying too. Whether she was able to verbalize it as like an adult would, she was doing the best she could at 3.5.
Such awareness at that age to even know how to talk about it.
Um, I then called Brittany, who was my best friend that I spoke to every day, because I needed to know what to do. I needed somebody to help me make the decision. I mean, I knew I needed to get her help, but I needed somebody to like tell me what to do because I was in shock.
And you're so broken down at this point after everything. It's like you live off validation at that point. You're used to asking for permission and needing somebody else to tell you if you're doing a good or bad job. Like there's so much conditioning that goes with that too.
I needed the support of my best friend at the time, which is why I called her. And so her boyfriend was a surgeon, and this is all in the affidavit that I gave to you of Brittany's affidavit. She says that I called her and I told them what was said, and they told me that she needed to go to the doctor, and I agreed. And I said, okay, so um, I started to make a pediatrician's appointment, like a pediatrics appointment, but it was quickly on the phone with them, verbalized to me that I needed to just to bring her to the ER. So I get a hold of my mom's friend who's here because I felt like I needed my mom, but my mother doesn't live here. And so a woman and another woman of my mom's age and I drove. She met me at Children's Hospital in, I want to say Minneapolis. It was Children's in Minneapolis. And this female doctor, older lady, met with us. I'm trying to encourage Hazel to say exactly what she said to me to this doctor. She didn't want to. She didn't want to say anything. Um, but so the doctor did a visual exam. He looked at her, or she looked at her from like a distance. There was no labs taken, no urine analysis, no swabbing, no speculum, nothing like that, no even touching. She said that there was mild erythema around the vaginal opening, so she was irritated. And with this having kind of been a common instance with perennial itching and UTI symptoms, this was just, that was something that was going on with her. And but she said no bruising, no abrasions. This is all written in the medical report too. And then she says, took me into another room. She marked on the sheet possible sexual abuse. Like she wrote that to start the process of an investigation. And especially with her having mild erythema around her opening. But in the other room, she took me to with the transcriber. There's a person with a computer that's typing everything that's being said for the report. And she said off the record, and this wasn't written, she said, you're set up for failure because she's not 4. And essentially kind of expressed to me that children under 4 can't can't disclose for themselves because they're too young. They can't, their voices are not considered credible because they're too young. Well, according to this doctor, under 4 years old, they can't advocate for themselves, is what she said. They cannot advocate for themselves. So I was told not to allow him around her, keep her home, within proper protocol. After an allegation is made, a disclosure is made, and a hospital visit occurs, within 72 hours, a forensic exam, physical exam, and a forensic interview is supposed to take place because it is timing of the essence. Within 72 hours, any evidence within her internally or externally would have been gone. And they want the interview to happen as quickly with the child for their mental health, sake. And that's protocol. That's typical protocol. When a woman alleges rape here or assault, there is a rape kit and a protocol that is done to a T. And if it's not performed exactly as it's written protocolically, then it leaves room for the predator to get away with the crime. With children here in Minnesota, there is no protocol. There's no by the book. You know, kid comes in, break out the brick. We got to do all these things, and we have to do it in this timely fashion. If we don't, we screw up the chances of justice. They don't have that here for children. So, initially, the first police that took up the first investigation was Richfield Police Department, and it was because that's where he was staying. He moved in with a friend of his and was living in Richfield. So, Children's Hospital had set up a forensic exam and interview with a place in Minnesota called Minnesota Children's Resource Center. And that was going to happen quickly. Richfield police detective canceled and changed our appointments. All of a sudden, the forensic interviews were going to take place 10 and 11 days later at a place called Corner House. And her forensic exam would happen there too. And that didn't have a date yet, but it was after that 72-hour window. And actually her forensic physical exam wasn't performed until October 5th, which is like 27 days or something.
That's so absurd that they can wait this long, especially with kids. It's like
They're not supposed to. They're not supposed to. That's the thing. Like, most people don't understand that the reason charges weren't brought was because the whole case was mishandled. Whether it's mishandled on purpose or not, it was mishandled. So, I get a call from a man. I traveled up north. I was afraid to be home. I remember that first night on September 11th, I had a friend, my friend Jeff, come and sit in the living room and just sit here awake so we could sleep, because I was afraid. I was afraid being in the house. He knew that I'd brought her to the hospital because I think he'd had an overnight scheduled with her, and he'd wanted to come pick her up and take her. And when he got here and came in the house, I just picked her up and I held her and I said, I know what you did. And I didn't say anything else. I just said, I know what you did. And I said, you can't have her. And he was very mad and he left. And then so we left Minnesota and we went to Brittany's house on September 13th, the 12th or the 13th. Is a 5-hour drive up to Grand Forks in North Dakota. And we spent the next 6 days there. I was probably in shock. I was trying to cope. My mother wasn't here. I was concerned about, like, I didn't know how far things had gone. I didn't know fully what Hazel had been exposed to or happened to her. But while we were up there, I tried to talk to her a little bit about it with my friend Brittany. I know Brittany spoke to her about it even when I wasn't around. And her affidavit consists of particularly 3 things that I know happened. One of them was, so there's things that happened up north in North Dakota. There was outcries, disclosures. And that is where Brittany's boyfriend, who was a surgeon, said to me that because Children's Hospital didn't take any lab work, and we were the forensic stuff was getting pushed out so far, he encouraged me to bring her, and she'd been scratching as usual, her perennial. He encouraged me and Brittany to bring her to the doctor for a UA. So one day we go to a hospital nearby in the Grand Forks, North Dakota area. And I express what's going on. I tell them the outcry. I tell them about going to Children's. I tell them about everything that's, kind of in the works. And they take a UA. They did another visual exam. Again, no touching her, no speculum or swabs. They don't do that to children. That happens in a forensic exam. Is the more invasive. That's one thing that I think people don't understand. I know is misconstrued about Hazel's case is the insinuation that she went through unnecessary medical procedures when this was discussed at the trial, and no, she didn't. So we were up there in Grand Forks, and
For parents that, because that is something that you were told is, they're not going to do those things. What should a parent do in that case? Because that worked against you to not have that evidence. Can you still get that done if you ask, even though that's not protocol for a child? Or what
I
should a parent do in that situation, do you think?
I think at the time I was unaware of the time frame and the timing of the essence. I didn't know
Right.
that that it had to happen so quickly, and why, if it didn't, what damage it could do in getting the help you need. I
I wouldn't
know that
know
when
that
we were up
either.
north, I know Brittany's uh, boyfriend was kind of surprised that Children's Hospital hadn't done kind of an initial, gathering of evidence, which would have been lab work, a UA and blood work. They may have not done an invasive procedure, which is what's done at a forensic exam, but they would have done the preliminary stuff to rule out any STDs, STIs, infections, UTI, blood, all the things that can come from abuse, that if you don't address it early enough can progress into worser things. So that's why we went to the hospital and in Grand Forks. But while we were there, because we went to the ER, it was a long process, it wasn't an appointment. By the time she'd had the UA, she'd peed in a cup, and they were testing that, and the doctor had looked at her and kind of just discussed with me what was going on. She was kind of over being there, she didn't want to be there anymore. And so we had to go back for the blood draw, which they drew out of her hand. They took blood from her hand. But in the day between the two doctor's visits, we had left Brittany's boyfriend's city house in Grand Forks and gone to his lake house to go boating and be in a different environment with them and her son. And so when we were at the lake house, we went to the closest ER to the lake house to get her blood drawn, because we knew all these records are requestable, and so she didn't have to go back to the exact same doctor. We were just kind of trying to keep everybody calm and happy and just deal with this as lightheartedly as possible. Essentially, the fact that we went to Children's Hospital, All True, and Crookston, the two up in North Dakota, I know that the guardian ad litem, when the initial first court hearing happened for custody, which he petitioned for, the guardian ad litem said to the judge in front of me and my friends and my mother and my attorney, "Your Honor, I think she's doctor shopping. She's been doctor shopping." And I hadn't been doctor shopping, but she set this tone with the judge and me. The judge now viewed me as I was trying to create evidence. And the guardian ad litem hadn't read the report from Children's Hospital, the report from Crookston, and the report from All True, because in all of them it states very clearly, I'm telling them what's going on and why we are where we are. And all the places state, if signs or symptoms increase or worsen, to come back in. So I was essentially doing exactly what I'd been told to do by the doctors. And the only time we were then able to present that I wasn't doctor shopping was fast forward from October 2018 to November 2019 at the trial, when we finally were able to kind of present to the guardian ad litem these records that she hadn't read. And if she had, she wouldn't have said what she'd said to the judge. And the judge wouldn't have viewed me in the light that she was, essentially encouraging her to give Hazel to her father for temporary sole, while we were waiting for the trial to happen. I mean, that whole year and a half of the 5 investigations, he had temporary sole custody. So let me try to figure out where I am in my chronology here. So we're up in Grand Forks, went to Crookston, went to All True, I had to come back. I had to come back for her forensic interviews. And Corner House had done something differently with these interviews than normal. This is all testified during the trial. One of the CPS employees, I believe her name is Jamie Beavers. Jamie Beavers said a couple things in the trial that need to be kind of highlighted. One thing she said about Children's Hospital, the first day we went on 9/11, Jamie had said the reason they delayed the forensic physical exam from MCRC to Corner House and so far along is because she said we didn't know Children's Hospital didn't do their job. So because CPS believed children just should have done what they are supposed to, then they delayed everything because they expected Children's to do what they technically kind of thought they would do, and they didn't do it. As well as Jamie said, Corner House had arranged Hazel's forensic interviews to happen in 2 parts, September 20th and September 21st, which is unusual. It's normally done 1 interview. It's not done in 2 days. But the gentleman who was assigned to be Hazel's forensic interviewer, his name is Bill. He was about 60 years old, 6 foot tall, an ex-police officer, broad-shouldered big man, was to take my daughter into a room by himself and ask her forensic and do a forensic interview with her. And she was supposed to give up information about the abuse she was experiencing by a man to another pretty intimidating man, which why they put my little girl in with a big guy to talk about being abused is beyond me. But let me backtrack a little bit. A couple of the things that were, so there was the doctor's visits up in Grand Forks to get the UA and the blood drawn. Luckily, she didn't have any STIs or STDs. She had, I think, an elevated white blood cell count, red blood cell count, because that was kind of had been pretty common for her at this point with the perennial issues and the UTI symptoms kind of continuously happening. She had, at Brittany's house in front of Brittany with me, I had asked Hazel, has anybody else ever touched you? And Hazel said, clearly and concisely and normally and casually, Warren likes the front. It's less icky than the back. Dada likes the back. Again, she's doing her best to explain something that is pretty clear, that another man preferred her vagina over her dad preferring her back. So at this point now I'm scared for exploitation and sharing because I didn't know anybody named Warren. I don't know. He didn't have any friends that I knew of named Warren. And for her to say this, and for us as adults to understand what she's saying, that, a man may have a preference between the vagina and the anus, but no 3-year-old should be able to explain that or describe it to anybody. As well as another time I'd been outside talking to my mom on the phone, pretty distraught. Every day I was really distraught and I was trying to get her to come here to be with us. Brittany was changing her son, changing his diaper, and I think he was fidgeting. So she said, if you don't stop moving, I'm going to spank you. And Hazel said, and I know she said this, I only know she said this because Brittany ran outside crying to reiterate to me what Hazel had just said. And Hazel said, when Dada hits me, Sachi goes crazy, like rah, 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 rah. Then Dada hits Sachi. And Sachi is our dog. So just like Brittany writes in her affidavit and how she explained it to me and my mom, who was on the phone in that moment, that she could picture my ex hitting Hazel and our dog being so protective of Hazel. And I'd never seen him hit her to an extent like a spanking, which would have warranted the dog to bark at him and go after him, but he was hitting her in such a manner that Sachi was brave enough to try to intervene, and he hit her. He hit the dog in front of our kid because he didn't want the dog to stop him from hitting my daughter. And I think at this time in the breakup, like that was when Sachi had to go on Prozac because she would just kind of sit in the corner and she was shaking a lot and she wasn't eating as much. And being a greyhound, she's very skinny as it is, but she doesn't eat when she's anxious and she's scared. She has a hard time eating. So she wasn't eating very much. And then the last thing that I guess Brittany wrote in her affidavit, and I wasn't in the room for when she had this conversation with Hazel, she asked her when her dad touches her, penetrates her, she asked her if it hurt. She asked Hazel if it hurt her. And Hazel said, "It's okay. It only hurts for a little bit, then it's over." And once again, these are all things that alone are enough that she shouldn't be with him. But on top of a UTI, kidnapping, making sexual comments, like it's just, like I said, you've got a wing, you got a beak, you got webbed feet, you got feathers, you've got it quacking. It's a fucking duck. She's sexually molesting her. So we left Grand Forks and drove back to the city because the forensic interviews were about to take place with Bill in the 2-day format that they were choosing to do with her, which was, I guess, irregular. They didn't normally do that. The first day we went in, I guess Hazel was comfortable, but he was trying to build a rapport with her. They didn't talk about any abuse. They didn't go into that kind of topic or discuss it. And then within like 10 minutes of a really quick, productive conversation, he just ends it and they're done. And she came out and they said, "We'll see you tomorrow." We come back the next day, and that interview has been described as just kind of all over the place. Hazel wouldn't focus. She wouldn't pay attention. She wouldn't engage with him. He was getting impatient with her by going, "Hazel, Hazel, Hazel," like trying to get her to talk. And she wouldn't. She didn't want to. She didn't want to talk. She didn't even want to engage with him, let alone discuss anything. So he ends the interview and he brings her out to me. I'm in the waiting room and he said, "Good interview, but no disclosure." And that's that. When your child, you're given one opportunity, or in our case, a 2-day opportunity, but kind of, it just wasn't done right. It wasn't done right. It shouldn't have been Bill. It shouldn't have been in 2 days. Like, best practices for forensic interviewing and gathering the evidence you need to press charges on a predator. This is not how you do it. And so with Corner House, kind of finalizing their interview process with no evidence was gathered, no crime happened sort of way, they let CPS know, they let Jamie Beavers know that they didn't get a disclosure, that there was nothing that they could use. And so Jamie, it's part of the trial, it was part of an exhibit, but Jamie wrote to my ex's attorney. I think it was my ex, might have been the police. I think it was his attorney though. They say, "Okay," and this was on September 27th, I want to say 27th or 28th. So a week after the interviews and 17 days after the initial outcry, they let him know they were closing the case. She didn't know when the paperwork was going to be done, but she wanted him to know that day they were done. And in Minnesota, it is 45 days is allotted for an investigation into sexual abuse by CPS. They are allotted a 45-day time frame. And here they are closing the case, letting everybody know it's all done and wrapped up and everybody's good. Go about your business. 17 days after the initial allegations, and they hadn't even done the forensic physical exam yet. That was scheduled for another week later on, like I said, October 5th. So after they've closed the case, they still proceed with a forensic exam that they're not going to find anything at because it's been too long. She's only been alone with me. She wasn't, I was told to not let him have her. And so I wasn't, and I wouldn't. And then even in the forensic physical exam, they, what was noted was a protuberance on her anus, which is, I guess, not really a normal forensic term when it comes to physical findings, but it means like essentially like a scar tissue of a healed anal fissure. So she would have ripped and healed and scarred, and it created a scar tissue nodule, like a bump on her anus. So essentially, she could have been wounded and then healed that whole time. And so
Did it raise red flags for them?
no, because everything about sexual abuse can be spun as something else. It can be explained as something else, and essentially it becomes circumstantial evidence. And in Minnesota, the standard to press charges has to be unequivocal evidence. They would have needed her to know how to say exactly what he was doing properly, like an adult, and say it right away to Bill without any problems. And they would have needed him to say, yes, I did it, essentially. Either of those two things. Or her to be incredibly damaged, ripped, torn, bleeding, problems, problematic. And with her having, at this point, I'm assuming probably by October 5th, she had made the statement, "Data pumps my tushy," which is what let me know he sodomizes her. The only way to look for evidence of that is to check the anal cavity for scarring, and they don't really do that until autopsies, really. They do that in autopsies. So first,
that there's a video that you have on your Instagram, and for people listening, like Allie does an incredible job on her Instagram. We'll have it linked below, but there's a video that you put up there that it went viral more than once, that you posted it, where Hazel was disclosing things to your mother too.
Yeah.
Using that same technology.
Yep. I'll try to, just for chronology's sakes, during the forensic interviews at Corner House, September 20th and 21st, the Richfield police detective that, because I told you that was the first police station that took the first investigation, and that's Hennepin County. That's not the county I live in, because it's the county where he lives in and like where it could have happened. So that's why they took the first investigation. So if you got to think about it, if you've got multiple police stations, multiple counties working the same individuals' cases, but they're not communicating, you've got things being missed and not building up a record like it should have. But at that interview, September 21st, Richfield Police Detective Miranda Soldo said to me, if she's talking to you about it, if she's telling you about it, you can record her, you can videotape her talking about it. This was testified to at the trial by the same CPS employee, Jamie Beavers, who said, we thought Children's Hospital did their job. It was the same CPS agent. She said she was there and witnessed Detective Soldo tell me, you can film her talking about it, which in the end, that was one of the biggest things that they tried to spin and misconstrue to use against me, was the fact that I videotaped us speaking about her abuse. I guess if to look at it in a very plain, simple way, I figured that was the best way for her to present what was happening to her, because of probably intimidation, not wanting to talk to strangers. Right. You don't want to talk to a doctor or a cop, or a man. you talk to your mom when you're a 3-year-old little girl and you're out crying sexual abuse you're enduring and you've been told to be quiet about. That's who you're going to tell. And so I wanted to make sure that what she went through was, there was evidence of it as best as I could, because I needed to protect her from what she was telling me was happening to her. And when you need to protect your child like that, you will do anything. And I wanted justice for my daughter. I didn't want to shoot him or hurt him. I wanted police to investigate, find him guilty of the crime, prosecute, and put him in prison, and him register as a sex offender, and my daughter be able to move forwards with her life, healing appropriately.
And
So
with the right parent, with you.
yes. So with Corner House saying there was no evidence, but not enough, and only circumstantial, not unequivocal evidence of abuse, and them closing the initial case even prior to the forensic examination, his petition for 50-50 was granted. That was not easy, having to like let her go with him, knowing what was going to be done, what she was going to experience, whether it be hitting or sexual abuse. I wasn't able to protect her. I wasn't able to protect her from what she told me was happening to her. So overnights begin with him, and he would take her, I think it was like he had 4 days and I had 3 days. It was something like that. And with the guardian ad litem having expressed to the judge, I believe the mother is doctor shopping, the judge had made a verbal order to me, which is the same standing as a written order. Judges can make verbal orders. They don't have to write it. She made a verbal order to me in court that I wasn't allowed to bring Hazel to the doctor anymore. So she was told an inference of a guess from a woman that hadn't read any paperwork and created an order based on it that essentially it was just wrong. It was wrong. It was not, it should have been appealed immediately when that all went down. And like I said at the time, I knew nothing about abuse. I knew nothing about custody court. I knew nothing about the law. I knew nothing about any of what I know so much about now. So she's going between our two homes. My mother was here with me, and she came home and her entire vagina and butt was very red and irritated, and she was scratching. And I knew I wasn't allowed to bring her to the doctor because I'd been told by a judge not to. But it became, am I negligent to my daughter's medical welfare and obey this judge? Or do I say, fuck you, judge, I know she's being abused and she needs to be looked at right now because there could be evidence that we are missing. So my mother told me to wait the night and like see how she was in the morning. She hadn't gotten any better, and we decided I would bring her in to like I said, again, we still didn't have a pediatrician down here. I brought her to the urgency room, which is like an emergency room, but quicker. And I brought her in there. I said, she's scratching and I think we need a urine analysis. I didn't go in saying she's being abused and there's evidence. Like I didn't say any of that. And they performed, they had her pee in a cup and the hat in the cup and they tested it. And then they took me into a different room, not with her, to go through some questions. And one of the questions that the doctor there asked me was, do you think she's being abused? Because her diagnosis was vaginitis. She had bacteria, mucus, epithelial cells. She had renal epithelial cells, which is your skin cells from your anus, in her urine. So she had a diagnosis of vaginitis and she was prescribed a cream to put down there. But since when they asked me if she's being abused, I wasn't going to lie. because the judge, besides no doctor's appointments, the judge had said no more allegations. I wasn't allowed to bring my daughter to the doctor, and I wasn't allowed to allege again. But I had to, because she had a diagnosis, and I wasn't going to lie to the doctor. And so they had to make a mandated report. And so this was November 12th now. Now we're 2 months past the initial allegation. November 12th, a mandated report to Dakota County CPS was made that Hazel, there was a probability of sexual abuse occurring and an investigation needed to happen. When that was filed in the system, his attorney filed to remove Hazel ex parte immediately from me because of breaking the judge's verbal orders of bringing her to the doctor. It didn't matter the diagnosis. It only mattered that I broke orders. So within like another day or two, I think it was November 16th, the police show up at my house, and I didn't know they were coming. Nobody warned me. And the officer at the door tells me to pack up her stuff because she's going to go with her dad and to not come back. And she hasn't come back since. So I packed a bag. I didn't put too much in there, praying she'd come home soon, you know. And I walk outside with her to the front driveway, and he's there. And the cop takes her hand, and I put a coat on her and everything, and he walks her to her dad, and her dad picks her up and walks her to his car. Like, and that was the last time my daughter was at my home. And she had vaginitis, and she was being taken by the person she said gave it to her at the will and orders of the police and a judge. So that sparked investigation number 2 into a mandated investigation, which they, I want to say it was the very next day, November 17th, maybe. They did a forensic interview with Hazel. And it's described in the forensic experts report, but essentially Hazel talks about, she mentions that she's afraid of both of us, both me, her dad, and I, and that, you know, we both scare her because of yelling and fighting. She talks about me putting the vaginitis medicine on her because it had to go down there, and I had to use a Q-tip to do it because I wasn't going to use my hand. And so she talks about that. She talks about a white stick with a white tip being down there, and that's the Q-tip. She didn't know what to call it. She asks, so she kind of like, she sort of talks about both of us doing things to her that she didn't like. Obviously, I'm sure she didn't like me putting that medicine on her the day before, but it was probably pretty fresh in her head since it had just happened. And so the interview is sort of a wash. You know, they can't do anything with it. They can't charge him, or they didn't investigate me. They just kind of closed the case. They closed the case again. They interviewed me. They interviewed him. I have the audio of them interviewing me. They yell at me. They say, "You have to stop trying to save her. You have to wait till she says it's happening." They yell that at me. And at this point, she had been saying it was happening. So it was kind of a weird thing to say to me. And then in the paperwork, them describing him in his interviews, they say that he is appropriate with his responses and very helpful informing them of the situation. They do. I also want to add, I totally forgot this, but in the first investigation by the detective in Richfield, Saldo, in her paperwork of her investigation, the entire report, I'm referred to as Adams the whole time because it's my last name, and he's referred to by his first name through the entire report, which is a very subliminal, maligning way to the reader to um, like, I don't have a personality. I'm Adams.
Right.
And he,
Delegitimizing you.
yes, and we'll just call him Bob. Like, he's Bob. Bob was very helpful in informing us information where Adams did this and that and this and that. As well as I know from the reports and all the paperwork that I have, because I have every report about every event. I have all of the paperwork to do with every single case. Being a pro se litigant in the Court of Appeals, I was able to petition for all of the sealed documents, which is every police report, every police record, every incident report, every CPS record, every medical record, every CPS interview, all the police body cams. I have all of it. And I'm allowed to because I appealed myself and I am my own attorney. So I know that the detective from Richfield, when I wanted a second interview with Hazel after Bill's was kind of botched, they weren't successful with Bill. I'd called the other place she was supposed to initially go to, Minnesota Children's Resource Center, and I requested a second interview because I was hopeful that if a female interviewed her, she'd feel more comfortable. And they turned me down. They were actually pretty short with me I remember that. They were kind of rude. And I was a little in shock. They're like, we don't do second interviews. No, they don't do that. And I'm thinking, what? So kids only get one shot and that's it?
That's
But
unbelievable to me.
that's the way it is. They only get one opportunity. And in the paperwork for the facility MCRC, it states that Detective Soldo had called them when I had requested the second interview. They spoke to the detective and she said she used the fact that I had been filming Hazel under her direction. She used it to superfluously kind of discredit me by saying, mother's filming herself talking to the daughter now. Like, she used it as a way to discredit me to MCRC, Minnesota Children's Resource, so that they wouldn't help me. So she had told me to do something, used it then against me, and then it was continuously used against me forward to kind of intimate that those conversations my daughter and I had were coaching.
Right.
Which I find would be very weird, to film yourself doing it and then turn it over to the police. That doesn't make any, like, the logic to that doesn't fit, but that's what was done. So then the second investigation after the vaginitis, her forensic interview there, I have that. That case was closed. And what was to proceed next was she was to live with her dad temporarily until the custody trial, which initially was scheduled for January 2019. So this was November 2018. We only had 2 months before the trial was supposed to take place. Which I don't think anybody can imagine what, first of all, your kid's gone. She's not there. She's been there every day for 3.5 years. My whole life was devoted around raising her and just being with her. I didn't do anything else. And now she's not here. She's gone. And I know she's in an environment where she has claimed that she is touched, she is hit, she is subjected to other males. And so, like, it was just a very traumatizing time through that November, December. To survive it, I put myself into the same dual diagnosis treatment center that I'd gone to in 2008 to quit drinking. It's not too far from where I live down here anyways. It was about a half hour, and it's a dual diagnosis. So it's for addiction and mental health, people who have both. And I knew I needed to be, I was all alone. I knew I needed to be watched all day because I didn't want to kill myself. I didn't want to, like, be succumbed to, like, how painful it was. And I was dealing with, in December, his birthday, Christmas, and New Year's all in, like, 1 week. And so, like, that was really a traumatizing time to think that he would be celebrating with her how he does. And I would be alone, missing her, and also just scared out of my mind for her well-being and what's going on with her. So I went into Cochrane for a month, and I got a few things out of there that I really, really needed. I didn't sleep the first week. I couldn't. Every time I shut my eyes, I could see what she had described to me. I'd asked her what he says when she told him it hurt her, like when she would say it hurts. She said that he said to her, "I'll do it softer, Hazel." So like I had such vivid things I could hear him say and see what was happening to her. I know she said he would make her lay on her back and put her hands behind her knees and make a circle so he could, for him to rape her. So like it was just very traumatizing and traumatic. So I was there. I think after the first 5 days of not sleeping, one of the other clients, patients, it was like 4 a.m. She sat down with me and she said, and I needed somebody to say this to me, but she said, "Allie, she will be okay." And like nobody had said that to me yet. And even though, she's not, I needed to hear it to keep fighting. I was also given the advice that this is going to take a lot longer than you could ever imagine. This is going to go on a long time. It's going to get worse before it gets better, and to do whatever it took to survive. Those were the 3 pieces of advice. And essentially, while I was there, I was under the mentality and constantly encouraged that I needed to put my gas mask on before I could put hers. I can't save her, protect her, rescue her without myself being in a place of being able to do that. So like how people will say to me, "I don't know how you're surviving this. I don't know how you're getting through this." Like if I was you, I would have lost my mind. If any of that was how I handled this, I will never get her back. I would never save her. I would never be able to maintain what I've been able to maintain in accumulating all the evidence and keeping everything on track, remembering everything exactly how it's even, the inferences of her voice, like the way she would say things. I remember exactly how she said it. I remember exactly what her face was like, where we were, what she was wearing. It's all so ingrained in my mind because the need to get her out of there is so great.
And
I cannot lose
you're also breaking your mind control. That's the point of abuse. They want you in a vulnerable, disadvantaged state. They want you addicted to drugs and on depression medication, going out of your mind and not able to fight and sitting on the couch and crying every day and being debilitated. That's what surviving is doing the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Every day. You're right. Like that's the part about this that people don't necessarily understand unless you've gone through it or you've listened to somebody, is that elongated process of what this whole thing is. It's not just this one day somebody just comes up to you and smacks you on the face. This is like years and years and years of a buildup for something and then taking advantage of you and you're so broken down and then challenging you on things you're never even educated on. Like I have no idea where to start if that was me and I was going through that with a child. You're not taught that.
No.
Any of it.
You don't even imagine that your partner could hurt your child, because if you even thought that, you wouldn't be with them. You wouldn't have had a kid with them. Like you can't, like any of the families on this street right here, like the moms, the dads, the kids, if I went up to mom and be like, "What if your husband's raping your kids?" Like they couldn't even go there. You just can't. As well as nobody in your mom group is like, "Hey, make sure that you look out for these things just in case." Like we don't talk about that. It's not, they don't teach it in school. There's no warnings in mom groups, like maybe to an extent, but not, it's more like the easier thing to talk about is stranger danger, right? Not your husband, your partner, their father, their grandfather, their uncle. You're not talking about your relatives as being predators because you can't, it's just not a natural thought. It's not a natural inclination. Um,
I've never thought about any of that before. And since learning about this, it'll be something I will always now think about. But I
yeah.
had no cognition before. I would have never in my wildest dreams, still to this day, I look back on my experiences and it's like you get those what ifs. Like, what if I did miss something now that I know that how easy it is to miss these clues? What if there were things that actually I did go through that I have no idea about, or that other people do, and they happen to maybe get out before things get worse, right? Or before they end up having a kid or experiencing this stuff. Like you really don't know. That's the point. You don't know until it's too late. It's designed that way. You Part of the reason why somebody like you or even me would be a target is because we're not educated in all this stuff, right? Like,
I know my history with mental health struggles, my history with chemical dependency, getting arrested in 2008 when I was 20. All these things were a culmination of things that make me a really prime target to use the not legal facts of family court against me. Like I don't stand as a credible, firm, founded person, and not having worked, being the stay-at-home mom. I didn't have a career, so I didn't have income. All these things are in favor of the the other. If it was the man was me, it could go both ways, right? A
sure.
woman can do this to a man as much as a man can do this to a woman. But I know all those things about me were particular things that either he knew or he kept encouraged. Like he kept encouraging me to get mental health help. He kept encouraging me to be on medication. He kept all these sorts of things were all things that he knew and used in court when even the first day of custody court, right? To establish himself over me and the judge. And that's essentially when judges looking at things really simply without having to dig too deep. They're like, okay, doesn't work, works. Been arrested. But even like him been arrested, I've been arrested. He's been to treatment, I've been to treatment. We both I carry mental health diagnoses. He didn't because he didn't get help. But so it was just all these things played in his favor, and they play in abusive people's favors in custody court. These things are used as weapons. They're weaponized against you. Getting help and getting all the help I did was used against me. Being sober because I'd gotten help for addiction was used against me. Like these things were used against me. Even when I was able to say in reverse, but he's been to treatment. He's a recovering heroin addict and cocaine addict and alcoholic, but he's drinking now. And he's been arrested. He was, there was an arrest for the narcotics charge and like I think assaults maybe, and then just other like little petty crimes around, like all the same. But he's 10 years older than me and a white male with an established career in an industry of about a decade long. And so when they look at it like on paper, they gave my daughter to him because what the evidence of abuse was formulated in the system with the police and the detectives and CPS, it wasn't considered enough or strong enough evidence to charge. So there was no charges ever brought. Not that the evidence wasn't there and it isn't real and it doesn't exist. It's there. Somebody made the decision. It's usually the district attorney makes the decision that it's not enough to press charges. So we don't press charges. And essentially with Minnesota, and I think probably a lot of places that have low crime rates, I question, is it low crime or low charge rates? Not that these crimes aren't happening, these people aren't getting charged.
or even coming forth and talking about it, right? Like it took you so long to break through that, to be able to go. I mean, I can't even imagine how scared you were at the doctors that one day after getting an order, breaking your silence and saying, I'm going to tell somebody about this.
Yeah.
You know, like that insane amount of courage to do that, knowing what's at stake and what you've been through. Those are like really the hidden things of abuse too, that work against you sometimes, because a lot of people would be scared. Well, the court told me not to, or my boyfriend said that, this would happen, or my husband, if I go tell somebody, this is going to happen to me. They're going to, they're going to beat me whenever I get home. They're going to do this, they're going to do that, or they'll leave me, right? I have a codependency on them. I need their finances right now. I don't have a plan B. They're going to get my kid anyways if I report this, because like you said, they look like the more favorable parent on paper. Like, we think in our head a lot of times when you're not going through something, it's so easy to judge a headline, one little sentence of a story, and say, why did they not do this? If I was them, I would have done this. How did they not know this? This is so obvious.
Yeah.
Not, especially like you took a lot of the protocols people would. You go to the doctor, you get an investigation started, you call, like you're trying to get an going to court and getting custody. You're trusting what they're telling you, and they're saying, oh, this is what you need, but you don't need these things, when in hindsight you needed that. You didn't know, though, you're supposed to even ask.
I kept trusting the system. I kept trusting that it would work. I kept trusting that the evidence would be enough, because to me it was. But instead, I mean, if you spin it like this, like mother lost custody because of breaking court orders of bringing the child to the doctor when she's been accused of doctor shopping. Let's unpack that a little bit. I wasn't doctor shopping, so I shouldn't have had a restriction of bringing her to the doctor. She did have vaginitis. She was given a diagnosis in medicine. It's just, there's way more to it than the simplistic explanation that the predator or the people supporting the predator say it as. There's so many more layers to it. And essentially, I think that's why I've been so hyper vigilant about acquiring, culminating, and comprising all the evidence, because I know it's all needed. Any little bit of it missing could be the reason she's not saved. And even having all that I have and all that is documented and recorded and on medical records, it's still all been considered not enough. And that's only because the standard in Minnesota is incredibly high to charge. It's cannot be circumstantial, which, with given the statistics of sexual assaults and molestation, the evidence is rarely ever there. It's rarely ever there. And so if you're going to say that it's got to be unequivocal, 100% proven, he basically has to admit doing it to get justice. Well, then you've got so many victims that will never get the justice that they need. And these children, my child specifically, are placed in the home of the abuser simply because there wasn't enough to charge him with. And I encouraged pursuing justice. I didn't just give up and say, well, maybe I'm wrong, because they wanted me to do that. They wanted me to say, well, maybe I didn't understand her right. I understand her perfectly. That's my daughter. I was there when she was diagnosed. I've seen the issues. I've been with her. I know it's happening. I won't bend like the court wants me to and take it back and say less and be like, it's okay, 50-50 custody, because I know saying that in a legal sense, I literally restrict any future allegations and justice, because I am now saying she is okay there 50% of the time. I know she's not, so I won't say that. But they want me to, and since I won't say it, he gets custody. That's like essentially, because I won't be flexible. I'm adamant. I was adamant. So that's the first and second investigation. That's September through November. That was like a lot for me to kind of, and I think I did a pretty good job of relaying all that information correctly. But I think I do want to talk about this now. I want to continue on a different day, because I'm a little.
No, I get.
I've realized that my neck does this. That's one of my PTSDs. That when I talk about it, that doesn't happen any other time other than when I'm talking about it. So I know I need to take a break.
100%. Yes. And we did mention this will be a multi-part series anyways. One gift that you have so many gifts coming out of this, but one of them is now your knowledge on all of this. What advice, before we go, for people listening that are like, okay, well, none of this stuff worked. Like, what if it happens to me? What would I do? I know that there's not really a perfect answer, but if you could go back and knowing what you know now, for parents or for anybody who wants to be a parent, who may go through this or who is, what advice would you give on starting looking into something like this?
Um, what's really tragic is I was informed that essentially what I should have done is set my daughter up as bait and set up a camera and got it on tape, because then there's no argument, right? I essentially should have gotten unequivocal 100% proof, which is almost impossible to get. But
Sure.
I do know that I listened to my gut a lot, even over what I was suggested or recommended by authorities, because my gut told me to be more protective than the authorities did. And not just protective of my daughter, but protective of the evidence that would get her the justice she needs, because I believe the justice is the part that gives her the healing. I believe her growing up and getting older, seeing that he had to pay the consequences of his behavior, will help her heal as a victim into a survivor, and not just carry around the damage of these experiences she's going through. So I followed my gut a lot. Um, Even though I recorded her talking about it and that was used against me, I have that. I have that of her talking about it. I wouldn't say go everybody talk to your kid and film it, but I know that that was one thing that I don't regret doing despite it being used against me, because I do believe in the end it will be one of the things that does help save her. Because this entire situation shouldn't have even gone into a family court. It should have gone into a criminal court. There should have been a jury. There should have been a trial in a criminal court of these criminal activities. But instead, it was treated like nothing criminal happened. Custody court. And the judge didn't even want to entertain the discussion of abuse. She didn't care to hear evidence of it because she'd been told that there wasn't enough to charge, so there's no point in even discussing it. Like, and that's kind of how it played out, which is so strange to me. So I know breaking the law binds your hands even greater, right? So don't run away with your kid, even though parents are like, I would have taken the kid and ran, right? I looked up cases that they did that. They went to prison and the child went to the abuser's home. Killing the abuser, the person who did that went to prison. The child either wound up in the CPS foster care system or never with that parent. The protective parent trying to do vigilante justice is villainized. And I looked at all the different options, right? And I decided that the best one to do, which may be the longest, was fight for legal justice within the legal system correctly. Even if the legal system isn't doing their job, I am. And so in the end, I get to say I did everything I was supposed to do. I did everything that should have been done. I dotted my I's and crossed my T's. I kept my side of the street clean. You guys fucked up. You guys fucked up her justice. You fucked up her forensic interview. You fucked up her forensic examination. You fucked up taking away my ability to bring her to the doctor, which inevitably put her in his hands because you guys didn't read reports and you listened to a gal who was just talking shit. Like, that's not me. That's the system fucked up. And so as long as I have my comprised evidence of the system fucking up, I can constantly continue to try to pursue real justice. And essentially with cases where you do achieve it in the end, even if it takes years to get there, that's where you can make the changes within the system that need to be made, so that there is a protocol for when children go in for sexual abuse, that forensic examinations are done right away, that the perpetrator isn't relied on, the person who's been alleged isn't relied on to be the one to bring her to these forensic interviews. That's going to be in the next video. But there's just, these children don't have the protection that they should have. And I don't know why that is. That's where you get into all the conspiracy theories, right? Because somebody then asks, well, why? Why would they put the kid in the home of the abuser? Why wouldn't they do what they're supposed to do? That doesn't make sense. And again, I have my own theories on that, and we can talk about that next time. But essentially, I guess to answer your question, my advice would be follow your gut, write down everything. buy a tape recorder, record even your conversations with the police, with CPS, with your attorney, record everything because you're going to need it. You will need it. You need to at least have record of everything that is said to you, about you, but it's, you have to, you can't have enough. You cannot have enough of, you almost should just walk around with a body cam. You know what I mean? Like you can't have enough.
Right.
And essentially in the end, everything will help. If you don't have it, what can you do with nothing, right? If you have it, at least you can try. You can at least try. And that's all I'm doing is trying. And I won't stop until she's home, until there's justice. And I have the tools to do it now because of what I have.
Cool. I appreciate you sharing that because that is a scary situation to think about being in, especially hearing firsthand what it can do to somebody and how long it takes. And I think that's part of what I want on this series for people to take away is to have a notebook full of tools, whether it's from a parenting side, whether it's from a survivor side or a victim side, or just wanting to advocate or learn, right? I look to you guys like you guys are the authorities. And I know it's not a subject that you ever wanted to be an authority on. And I'm so sorry that you're made an authority from something so freaking horrible. Ah, um, but it's a gift that you and every survivor that's come on here, hopefully your voices will prevent any of this from ever happening again. You know, you guys are like, they messed with the wrong mamas. I'm sorry, but like, this is not going to end good for these people. Like, you do not mess with people's kids. You don't mess with people's kids. But there's no moms on the planet that could bring justice like you moms can. So it's a shitty, like, thing that you guys have to go through. I know there's a reason. Like, there's not. Hazel's so lucky to have you as a mom. So is your other baby. Like, no moms. There's so many moms that would never fight. Like, she's so
I
lucky.
think there's no moms that their hands were tied behind their backs quite quickly, and the advice they were given didn't help them. And
Right.
that's what I realized, and I slowly saw over time was that I was being told, and what was happening furthered justice. It furthered it away and away and made it almost impossible while I kept clinging to, nope, it's not going away. It's going to happen. I'm going to fight for it. And it's a chess game that I don't know how to play, but I have to try play it better than these professional chess players that hold all the cards and can write all the paperwork and can superfluously describe you to anybody in the system, and they all work with each other. You are an outsider begging for help from people that don't want to help you. It's weird, and it doesn't seem right or real as it's happening, and it's very hard to truly see it until it's like even way done. You have to you have to look back on it and go, did that seriously happen the way it did? Because when you're in it, you don't see it. You just feel, and you're panicked, and you know you have to help your kid, and you know you have to protect your kid, and then they take your kid, and then you got to try get them back, and you're losing your mind. But you can't lose your mind because then they can say, look, you lost your mind, and that's why we took her. Like, it's a giant game. It's a giant manipulation, and it's not something I'd wish on anybody in this world. And upon going public with my case 2 years into it, I have now found and communicate with mothers in my exact shoes at different stages of the fight, 90 days in, 3 years in, even some that are years in. I've met mothers that did get their kids back. Francesca Amato Banfield in New York, who is working on changing things within the New York assemblies, and Marilyn McLean, who got her kids back, who wrote the book Prosecuted but Not Silenced, which is like I said, we get in legal trouble for this continuous fighting because we're saying things we're not supposed to say. We're exposing things we're not supposed to expose. We're talking about things that we're not supposed to talk about. So we get prosecuted for it. We get legally abused, drugged through slap suits. And it's weird, and it doesn't make sense to people. It doesn't make sense to us either, but that's how deep in the hole we go, because we're just trusting and trusting and trusting and trusting until we're at the bottom going, fuck, they didn't help me.
Right.
Or my
And now I don't know
And
how
you
to
get
get out of
them
here.
for help. Like,
Right.
yeah.
You're a hero. You're a hero, plain and simple. You're one of the most brave, courageous, but soft and kind people I've ever met. Like I said, Hazel, there couldn't have been a better mom for her. For children that unfortunately do have these things happen to them, I pray that you inspire every mom to fight like you are.
I think one of the saddest things from having a public presence about this and having 20,000 followers, which was 26 at one point, the hundreds and hundreds of messages and comments of people saying, I wish I would have had you as a mother, because their mother either didn't fight or gave up. And I don't think all mothers that did that are bad. I believe a lot of hands were tied and people didn't know where to turn or what to do.
Right.
But today we have social media, we have whistleblowing, we have exposing corruption, there's a platform now to do what I think a lot of mothers in the past had no way to reach for that information, those resources, that access, the camaraderie. Like, that's only available now.
Right.
And so when these girls will say to me, I wish I would have had you as a mother instead of the one that let them down, it's so sad to know that this has been going on for so long, and so many people didn't get what they should have. They didn't get protected, they weren't saved. Their abuser is walking free, has another family, 7 more kids, is an architect, like, it's just insane. I met people that had the same guardian ad litem that I had. I met people that had the same CPS director that I had, that their dad is walking around in Dakota County with a job, and they're 24 years old now, and it happened to them at 4, and they never got their justice. And it's 20 years later, and they saw my story, and they just wanted to let me know that they went through it here too, just 20 years ago. And there's newspaper articles they sent me about it. Like, it's just insane, the commonality of this, but not so common or media sized that everybody knows.
Right.
It's only common within people that have any kind of understanding or experience in the family court system or with CPS at all. Because there's people that say, oh, they only take kids from mothers who are unfit and committed crimes. I've never been found unfit. I haven't committed a crime. I didn't do anything wrong. There was nothing used against me in court to warrant her to not be with me. That is what is so strange. There's no reason she's not here. The only reason she's not here is because a family court judge said she doesn't want me to ask her if she's being abused anymore. She thinks if I ask her, I'm hurting her. And my response is, me asking her she's being abused doesn't even pale in comparison to the fact that she is being abused in the home you placed her in. So that's weird. And so I'll fight until I can correct it.
Well, we're here fighting with you, and I appreciate you so much for coming on today and talking. I can't, so hard to listen to it and to try to put myself in your shoes. I can't imagine living and talking about it. So I just appreciate you.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
I'm sorry, everybody. This has been an emotional episode, but we'll support you too.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I wouldn't trade some of the people and the relationships I have created in this heinous journey for anything, because I have met some of the kindest, strongest, most empathetic, intelligent, willing to listen, wanting to read, wanting to know. They want to understand, not just write it off or say that doesn't make sense, or my predisposed knowledge of these types of situations, which is completely wrong, is why I'm going to discredit you, invalidate you, even bully you about your trauma. So I've met some wonderful people, and it shows how few in this world there actually are, but they are there.
Oh my gosh. Like I said, they mess with the wrong moms. You moms are warriors. And the fact you're all coming together, it's beautiful. So for everybody listening, I'm going to link. Sorry, I'm like so emotional. I'm going to link all of Allie's stuff below. So connect with her. Please support her. Please share this episode. I can't stress that enough.
please share these episodes, this information. Like we just said, it's not on the front page of every newspaper, but as you've listened, it should be. This should be what's on the front page of every single thing that we see are these types of cases and people speaking up for people and children that can't speak up for themselves. So that's the absolute best thing that you could do to support a survivor is to go directly to them and support them. Go to her page, donate to anything that she has, support her story, share this episode. And Allie, where's the best place that people can find you?
My so I have an Instagram. It's not a public Instagram anymore, but it's Justice for Hazel. It's JUSTICE period FOR period HAZEL. Try to avoid any of the trolling sites, but that's my one. It says my name on it. It has a picture of me and Hazel. It's 20,000 followers. I have a Facebook, which is Justice for Hazel group and page. I'm not as active on them, but they are there, and you can find access to like some of the stuff that I share, such as the forensic experts report, different pieces of evidence that I am legally allowed to share, her drawings, her outcry videos, different things that even if it's as hard as it is to see and view and try to understand, I believe that this information is necessary if you have children or you've got children in your family, or you know what I mean? Like people,
for everybody. We should all have learned about this as children growing up. It should have been part of what we've learned all along.
There should be more protection given to children in the form of information, resources for sharing. Children, I'm not saying like the whole like teaching kids about sex at a very young age is a slippery slope, but I think teaching kids about being told to keep secrets about a parent touching them. The more commonality of abuse is a familial relative abusing over a stranger coming up to you and offering you a puppy if you come with them. That's what we believe it is, but that's not actually what it is. It's more often than not a familial relative, somebody with easy access to the child who takes advantage and then, trauma bonds and coerces and gaslights and threatens them and intimidates them. And children are too young to understand that when a parent says, if you tell mama, I'll kill you, the kid will not speak. But they need to know that that's actually when they do. And unfortunately, that education isn't there for them. It's not, because it's too heinous, I think, for people to think. I'm sure there's a degree of wanting to protect kids from fear, but I think the information and fear isn't as changing or detrimental as the trauma of the experience if they're not able to protect themselves. If that makes sense.
100%, yes. And that's pretty much the point, is we have to get more comfortable talking about this, because whether or not we want to talk about it, it's happening all over the world. You're not just some one-off case. Like, I've had multiple mothers on here. There's more lined up to come on. We haven't even finished your story yet. This is common, and this is something all of us should be able to talk about, and we should be talking about it. This should be, like I said, this should be the first thing we wake up thinking about, is what can we do about this? Like, this is a massive problem. So, Allie, just thank you for coming on. I appreciate you so much. This isn't easy, but your story is important. You have a whole army behind you. You have people supporting you, and you're going to have more. Like, it's inevitable that you're going to have such a huge dent in people's lives. And so many cases like yours are going to be prevented from you coming forth and talking. So just thank you with all my heart for being on here.
Thank you. That's my goal, is to, if I can save one heart from breaking here forward, I've lived a purposeful life. So that's the point.
You're going to do that and so much more, girl. I'm so honored to know you. But you guys, we'll be back next week with part 3. Maybe there'll be a part 4. We'll see. But for now, part 3. So we'll see you all next week. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, please share, subscribe, go support Allie. All her information is going to be in the show notes. And we'll see you guys next week for part 3 of this episode. Allie, thank you again.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.